Hello everyone, nice to see you again, and let me continue what we were doing. So on Monday we discussed an example of constructing a bridge, and in this case we had to make a choice between two alternatives, and the problem in this is that actually by choosing one, we have to automatically reject the other because we cannot have both bridges on the same place. And furthermore, another tackle in this problem is that actually they have different investment horizons. So if we choose a wooden bridge, then it will live shorter, but on the other hand, if we choose the steel bridge, then it will be long lasting for 40 years. Therefore, actually it is not sufficient to compare their NPVs directly. And we were able to make our own conclusion based on the fact that because they have different periods of investment or the outcomes, so we have to set their length the same, and one way was to calculate the least common multiple and consider that for each of this bridge we are going to maintain it for 40 years, and then it means for the wooden bridge that will last for 10 years, we have to build the bridge again and again so that it could be maintained for 40 years, as same as the steel bridge. And then by setting the length of the investment the same, we were able to compare them. And our conclusion was that actually, if we consider the total cost to be paid for the 40 years, then the steel bridge is cheaper, so we have to choose the steel bridge instead of the wooden bridge. And today, we will discuss another method to discuss this problem. So basically, the idea in the last class is that we have to set the two alternatives investment horizon the same, and therefore we extended the first one so that we have the same line of finish, and then we can compare them directly. And now today what we are going to do is that if they have different lives, and then maybe we can think about the average cost per year. So we are going to think about 1 year for each of these bridges, and then we are going to compare the annual cost. So we are not going to expand it, but not actually we are going to shrink it to the annual level, and then we are going to make our own decision. So this kind of concept is called the equivalent annual cost, or EAC. It means it is the average cost which is uniformly distributed, so the same cost every year for the total investment period over the 10 years and over the 40 years. And therefore, we have now the same length of the time, 1 year, for each of the bridges, so we can compare them. And then how can we calculate the annual cost? It is possible by think about this timeline. So for example, for the wooden bridge, we have 10 years. And we can calculate the total cost in their present value. and then we are going to distribute this total cost over the total investment period uniformly, which means it should be the same as paying certain amount of money on the first year, the same amount of money on the next year, same amount of money in the third year, same amount of the money on the fourth year, until we have the final 10th years the same amount. And here the equation to get this unknown number is that the present value, the net present value of this cost to be added should be the same as the total cost we have. And therefore, first we have to calculate the project's NPV, and we are going to distribute it over the investment period, and we discount each of the cost depending on the time. Therefore, we have discounted factor until we have 1/10th discounted factor. So by putting the 15% into the interest rate or the discount rate, and by calculating this, we can calculate the EAC. Here, it seems very dirty and complicated. However, it is possible to calculate it because actually this is a equation of the first order, not the 10th order. So what I mean is, actually we multiply EAC for the only one time for each of the variable. So it can be written as EAC times 1/, if we put 15% here, 1/1.15 squared, 1/1.15 third. Finally, we have 1.15 to the 10th power. And this should be the net present value, which we already know from our calculation. So this was minus $203. And we can calculate this, although it may take a while for you to run your calculator. However, it can be calculated. It will be some number, and this is what we want to know. So we can divide this 200.3 with this number, and then we can get the EAC. And the result is that EAC, the equivalent annual cost, should be minus $39.9. And on the contrary, for the steel bridge, because it will last for 40 years, we have distribution over the 40 years period. Therefore, we have 40 terms. However, still, we put the same number on the numerator, so we can calculate this. So by solving this equation, we can get that EAC, the equivalent annual cost for the steel bridge, is $35.1. And that means, on average, we pay approximately $40 every year if we construct the wooden bridge. On the other hand, if we construct the steel bridge, we only have to pay $35 every year. So it is much cheaper. Therefore, we have to choose the steel bridge instead of the wooden bridge. And that brings the same conclusion as we had from the first method. Okay. And let me talk about the next situation. So the situation, another different situation is the capital rationing. So by the capital rationing, it means that usually a firm has a limited budget. So it has a limited amount of cash, or it has limited amount of financial resources. Therefore, it have to choose that it can bear under this budget. And in this capital rationing situation, even though so in other case situation without the capital rationing, usually all three measures of investment criteria gives the same result. For example, the net present value approach, internal rate of return, or the PI or the BCR gives the same conclusion. However, for this specific situation, maybe we will experience that those method or the approaches give the wrong, different decisions. Therefore, we have to be very careful in this kind of situation. And what is more correct, it depends on the specific characteristics of those investments. So let me talk about this through an example. So here is a Sullivan Electronics company, and this company has a limited budget of $200,000. So it cannot spend more money exceeding $200,000. However, they have to choose some of the investment opportunities. So they have 4 different projects available. So they are called investment A, investment B, investment C, and investment D. And they require different size of the initial cost. So for example, for investment A, they have to put $200,000 at the beginning. However, for project B, they only have to pay $120,000. Project C requires only $50,000. So they are very different in their size. And the analyst already calculated the NPV, net present value, and the benefit cost ratio, and the internal rate of return for us. So we are going to use this criterion. And it depends on the characteristics of the investment. So let me provide more details. So first case is that we cannot invest in these projects fractionally, or we cannot have duplicated investments. So in other words, those investments are unique. So there is only one choice. There were only 2 choices for each of the investment. We take it or not. 0 or have 1. And then in that situation, we have different set of our choices. So let me go back to this. So because we have a limited budget of $200,000, if we choose investment A, we immediately spend $200,000. Therefore, we have no money left. That means we cannot have B, C, nor D as long as we have A. And on the other hand, if we choose B, we spend $120,000 first. However, because we had $200,000, so we still have $80,000 in my hand. And then, although we cannot have A further, but we can have C or D with the B. Therefore, we have a combination of B plus C or B plus D. And if we choose C first, we spend $50,000 first, which means I have in my pocket $150,000. So, and then I can still have B or D, but I cannot have A. So I have C plus B or C plus D. Finally, if I choose D first, then I spend $80,000 first, and I have $120,000 in my pocket. Therefore, I can further choose B or C. So conclusively, summarizing this, I have those sets of investment choices. So I can choose A only, or I can have a combination of B or C, B and C, and I can also have a combination of B and D. Finally, I can choose C and D together. And because the net present value is the sum of the present values, we can calculate this combination's net present value by adding the two NPVs, which are all positive. Therefore, for example, if I only have A, I will get $10,000 as the net present value. However, it is lower than the next combination because by choosing B and C together, I can get the benefits from B. At the same time, I can get the benefits from C. So I have 8 plus 6, which means I have $14,000 as the net present value of this combination. And in the third choice, I can also choose B and D together. And because D has the net present value of $6,000, I can also have $14,000. However, they are the same in the amount. However, the initial costs are different. So we have to choose either one of them based on our criteria. And finally, if I choose C and D, then I have 6 from C and another 6 from D. So I have 12,000 in overall. And therefore, among those 4 choices, I think I have to choose the second or the third one. And if we go back to the previous information, if I choose B and C together, I have to spend $170,000. And if I choose B and D together, I have to spend $200,000. So it seems reasonable to choose B and C as our choice because it is cheaper and yields the same return for us, right? So we have the final NPV is the same. However, because it is cheaper, it seems more efficient for us. So that's why maybe I can choose B and C as the final choice. Or if you believe that we don't have to keep the rest of the money, then you can alternatively choose B and D as your choice. It depends on your reasoning, but the net present value approach does not tell you which one is correct because they have the same NPVs. So you have to make your own choices. However, one thing is clear, that you should not choose investment A solely. You have to choose some of the combination because although it seems that the project A's NPV is very high, is the highest among the others, but by choosing this, you will lose the other opportunities. Therefore, it is better to have small 2 investments together than having one large investment project, right? So it depends on your situation. So it depends on your capital budget. So in this kind of capital rationing situation, then you have to choose some other projects if you would not have choose in case of no capital rationing. Right, and let me go back to the BCR. So we decided to choose B plus C or B plus D as our choice in this case. However, BCR, I'm just going to ignore the IRR here in this case because IRR is clearly wrong. But let me compare the BCR with the NPV method. So here, based on the BCR, what we need to prefer is the C because its BCR is the highest among others. However, and then the second choice should be the D because this is the second highest. Therefore, if we didn't know about the NPV, but we only had information about the BCR, then we should choose C first, and then with the remaining money, we have to choose D. However, it is wrong. As you can see, if we actually compare the NPVs, it is better to choose B first and then choose C or D as an additional project. Therefore, in this case, you can say that BCR is wrong. So that's why I always emphasize the usage of the net present value. This is the only truth that you can rely on, but sometimes BCR or IRR can give you some wrong information depending on the circumstances. And let me think about another condition. So in the previous analysis, we assumed that there is no fraction or the duplication in our investment. However, let me just think about the duplicated investments. So you may quite be surprising, or it may seem unrealistic to have a duplicated investment. However, actually, you face a lot of this situation, especially in the stock market. For example, you can purchase one share of the stock. However, at the same time, you can decide to purchase 2 shares of the same stock. So by having 2 shares, you have a duplicated investment. And it is possible because in the stock market, those shares have the same value. When you have 1 share, you have some return. And if you have 2 shares, then the returns should be doubled. So there's a linear relationship. And in that case, we can say that we can have some duplicated investments in our choices. And let me see what will happen for this company. So now it becomes more complicated because now we have to think whether we can have multiple choices. So let me go back. If I choose A, then I cannot do anything further because, as I told you, we already spent all of our money. However, if I choose B for first time, and then we have $80,000, so we can choose C and D additionally, and that's the same as the previous situation. And the strange thing happens when we choose C first. Now, if we choose C first, we spend $50,000 and we have another $150,000. Therefore, not only choosing B or D further, but also we can choose to have duplicated investment in C. For example, because we have $200,000 and it takes $50,000, therefore we can purchase four C's together. So we don't have to limit our choice as the only one purchase of C, but we can have 4 C's together. So it is another unique solution for us. And similarly for the D, because 200,000 divided by $80,000 is 2 plus something something. So we can have a double investment in D, and then we can think about what are we going to do with the rest of the money. So as a result, we have more choices available when we can duplicate our investments. So we MPV of A once, it was also possible in the previous situation. This was also possible, the combination of B and C. Combination of B and D was also possible. However, now we have 4 times of C and 2 times of C plus D, and we have 2 times of D. And then we have to compare those combinations together, and by comparing the numbers, it brings that we have the highest net present value when we have 4-time investment in C, which is $24,000, among others. Therefore, according to the MPV method, we have to choose this one. So we have to purchase C 4 times. And let me go back, because now I realize that maybe BCR can be very intuitive, or it can give some idea about our choice. And as you can see, if we compare the BCR, the C the investment C's BCR is the highest. Therefore, according to the BCR approach, we can choose a C and then think about what we can do with the money. And because still we can purchase additional C, and that's why we finally end up with having 4 of C's. So in this case, when we have duplicated investments, actually BCR is more intuitive. So if we only use the MPV approaches, then we have to care about these a lot of alternative investment options, and then we have to compare each by each and to get the highest value. However, because in this case, we can only just take a look into the BCR and choose the highest one. So that's why I think BCR is informative in some cases like this. So that's why you have to use not only MPV but also the BCR in reality. And finally, there's another situation. So in this third condition, now we are going to assume that we have a fractional investment. So the fractional investments are also possible in reality. For example, some companies can purchase the other shares of other companies. However, they can only not only having 100% of the shares, but they can have, for example, 50% of the shares or 40% of the shares. So the ownerships are fractional, right? Therefore, sometimes in reality, in certain situations, we can invest fractionally. So we can have this kind of situation. And then let me think about what we can do. So again, if we choose A, then there is no other choice. However, if we choose B, we spend 120 among 200 and we have 80. And then we can choose C, and 80 minus 50 is 30. Therefore, by choosing B and C together, we have the remaining money of 30. And we can fractionally invest in D, so we can only have the ownership of 3 over 8, and third of 8. And that's possible if fractional investment are allowed. And simultaneously, we can choose B first, and then we can choose D, and then we don't have no money left, therefore that's the end. And if we choose C first, we have 200 minus 50, which is 150, and we can choose B or C. If we choose B as a next step, we have 30 left, and then it will bring on the same conclusion as the other situation. So we can choose D, and then we spend 80 among 150, therefore we have 70, so we can invest only 7th of 12 to the B. So that's another choice available. So if we summarize those different paths in our investment, we have this kind of set. If we choose A first, there is no further action. If we choose B first, we can choose C, and because we have 30 left, we can have 3 over 8 investment to the D. Or we can have B first, and then we choose D, and that's the end because we don't have money left. And finally, we can choose C first, and then we can choose D first, D second, and because we have 70 left, we can have 7 over 12 investment into the B. So that's all the combinations available. And finally, in this case, you can think of the MPV distributed depending on your ownership. So for example, if I invest 3 over 8 into the D, because its MPV is 6,000, 6,000 times 3 over 8 will become 2,250. Therefore, you get this amount of the net present value from the D investment, and by adding the NPV of B and NPV of C, you have the overall total NPV of 16,250. Similarly, you can also calculate the fractional NPVs from the 7 over 12, and then you get this one. And by comparing all of them, you conclude that the last one has the largest NPV left for you. Therefore, this should be your choice. So again, we have different choices available. And let me compare. So in this case, our choice is that we choose C first, and then we choose D as a second, and finally we choose B with the rest of the money. And let me go back to the table. And that is exactly the order of the BCR, from highest to lowest. So we choose C first because it has the highest one, and we choose D as a second because it is the second highest, and finally with the rest of the money we choose the B because it is the third highest one, and we ignore the A. So again, in this kind of fractional investments, you can rely on the BCR, and then you can easily obtain the result, easily make your decision, not only by calculating the NPVs for all of those combinations.